We are kicking the Big Nation era off with an absolute bang. I'm picking every single game with scores in the Big Ten Conference. Who makes it to Indianapolis? Who makes it to a bowl? Who gets that first round bye as the Big Ten champion? I'm putting it all out on the line with my season predictions. Who's on upset alert? Which teams in the Big Ten could put others on upset alert? Talking all things upsets. I've got 5 of them that could go down here during this college football season. 1 through 18 and everybody in between. Who are the best defenses in the Big Ten? I'm going to power rank them. We are absolutely loaded on the very first Big Nation. Let's roll.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
I am so freaking excited for this Big Ten college football season that kicks off in just 9 days. And I am so excited about the Big Nation era here on the Big Ten Ted Networks, on YouTube, on Spotify. Follow on Twitter at Big Ten Ted. Big Ten coverage, all Big Ten, all year long. You know how it is. You know how it is. We are chock full of content. We are starting things off with some hard-hitting topics right off of the bat. But before we get to that, I want to get to some shout-outs, and I want to get to a big announcement here coming up. Let's start first with some shout-outs. You heard them just now. Voiceover artist extraordinaire, local Twin Cities broadcaster, Matt Dean. I want to give a shout out to Matt for the voice on the open. You'll also hear him on the outro at the end of the program as well. Local Twin Cities broadcaster, St. Paul Saints AAA Baseball, the AAA affiliate of the Minnesota Twins. Also Minnesota State Mavericks men's hockey this year, play-by-play, as well on local high school sports. So thanks to Matt for lending his voice here to Big Nation and Big Ten Ted. Also, want to give a shout out at CFB_rivalries on Twitter. You saw the logo refresh during the season for the Big Ten Ted portion of content. You've seen it on Twitter. You've seen it on YouTube. You've seen it across the socials that I've been posting with some of the graphic content as well. And then in the open there, and also at the bottom of the screen there on the lower third bar, the Big Nation logo work. That's the credit of Nate over at CFB_rivalries on Twitter. Does a phenomenal job. Some great in-season college football content as well from a graphic design perspective. So hit him up if you want some graphic design work done yourself over there. Let's head to a big announcement because I've got one. And I'm really excited for this one. College football, Big Ten college football, kicks off in just 9 days. When the North Carolina Tar Heels come into Dinkytown, they come in to Huntington Bank Stadium to take on the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And I will be there, sidelines, covering this matchup. So you are going to see reaction from me. You are going to see reaction from head coach PJ Fleck and players from the press conference after that game. So I will be on site covering this game. Might also have an announcement a little bit later on with a football game at the end of the season. That also ends in Annapolis, but we'll save that for a rainy day. Let's get to the game plan because game plans are so important for coaches to put together. It's very important to be prepared, and we're going to be prepared on Big Nation. But the key about a game plan, you got to execute it, and we're going to execute here today. All right, so what are we talking about on the very first edition of Big Nation? Upsets. A lot of people out there, when they're putting out their predictions, they're writing it in chalk. They're writing it with the favorites, the Vegas favorites. That's not how college football goes. The big reason that you and I love college football is because of the upset, the anatomy of an upset, what goes into it, what comes out of it. We're excited about the upset. So we're going to talk 5 upsets. I'm not saying they're the top 5. I'm not saying they're predicting that these will happen. Hey, upset alert. Just watch out for it. Also, the Big Ten, man, they are the conference of defense. There are so many great defenses in the Big Ten Conference, but I'm going to rank them 1 through 18 and everybody in between. Who's the best? Who's at the bottom? Very excited to go over things on the defensive side of the football. And then the main event. This is maybe what y'all came here for. Season predictions, game by game, including scores. Who gets to a bowl game? Who's the surprise team? Who gets to Indianapolis? Who gets that first round bye by winning on the first Saturday in December at Lucas Oil Stadium? We are going to cover that as well. All right, let's kick the Big Nation era off with our first segment, that talking upsets. A big reason we love college football is because of the upset. And I think going to an 18-team Big Ten, no divisions, 4 different football cultures coming in out west, I think we are prime and I think we are ripe for some really good upsets. Now, these are not 5 upsets that I'm predicting to happen. These are not the top 5 probability in upsets that I think will happen. I'm just saying, I look throughout the schedule. These are 5 upsets that I could see really shaping the Big Ten season. So these teams, upset alert. Let's get right into it. And let's start first with week number 3, this Notre Dame-Purdue game. It's a rivalry renewed, and it's a very interesting matchup for me because let's start first with the Purdue Boilermakers. Okay, they're going to kick things off with a home game against Indiana State. Okay, Indiana State, they're not a Dakota. They're not a Montana school, right? They're not at the top of the FCS. Okay, so Purdue, they're going to be able to roll the ball out there. They're going to be able to roll the helmets out there and win this football game handily. After that game against Indiana State, the Purdue Boilermakers have a bye before playing the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So you put that all together, what does it mean? It means Ryan Walters and his coaching staff and his players, they've probably been preparing for this Notre Dame game ever since the beginning of the offseason, ever since we go into spring, ever since we go into fall camp. They've had their eyes on this game. It's at Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette, Indiana. Now you look at the other side. You take a peek at the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. What's game number 1? Where is College Game Day going to be the very first week of the season? Kyle Field in College Station, Texas, where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish take on the SEC's Aggies of Texas A&M. That is a tough week 1 game for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, they come out of that game, they play the Northern Illinois Huskies, so I think they're able to, even if they do fall into that one, they'd be able to get back on the winning track against that one. But Purdue's just sitting there lying in the weeds. They're able to watch that week 1 contest against Texas A&M and really take in what Notre Dame is, because Notre Dame wants to be that college football playoff team. When you look at Notre Dame's schedule, I feel like this is a game that they almost need to win right off the bat in College Station. So they might reveal more on film than they would like to reveal, because this is a good Texas A&M team and they got to be ready to go in week number 1 for Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish to make the college football playoff, because there's a few other games on this schedule, games like USC, games like Florida State. That certainly won't be easy for the Irish. Now, it is a pretty manageable schedule for them to get to the college football playoff, but I feel that they're going to put a lot of effort into winning that football game and to put a lot of chips on the table in that week 1 game against Texas A&M and Purdue. Man, they're just going to be able to kind of sit back, watch, and learn about what Notre Dame is all about. And then Purdue, they're not going to put a lot on film, certainly, against that Indiana State. They're going to try to keep things a mystery for Notre Dame in that week 3 matchup as well. Let's fast forward to week number 8. I got 2 matchups in week number 8 where I've got teams on upset alert. Now, I'm going to start this Nebraska-Indiana game from the Nebraska perspective. We all know about that Colorado game. Second game of the year for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. We all know the hype that's coming into that. We talked about the train when talking about Purdue. The hype train is going to be coming in from Boulder, Colorado, and whoever wins this game between the Huskers and the Buffaloes, they're going to be getting on that hype train and they're going to be riding it themselves. Whether it's Nebraska or Colorado, a lot of media attention is going to be focused on the winner of that game in week number 2. Now, I believe Nebraska is a more complete team. I believe Nebraska is just a better football team. It's at home in a night atmosphere. This one should go the way of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And then you look at the momentum that can be created from Nebraska finally getting off the schneid against their out-of-conference rival in the Colorado Buffalo. You look at what they have coming off of that. Home game against Northern Iowa. They have a home game against Illinois. They go to Purdue, home against Rutgers, right? The maybe more difficult games, 3 out of 4, Illinois and Rutgers, are at home during that stretch. If they're able to beat Colorado, Nebraska should be a 6-0 football team. But you know what they would be a couple of weeks from now? They'd be going to Columbus, Ohio to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. They got to go to Bloomington the week before they go to Columbus. It's a classic look-ahead spot. Everybody telling Nebraska, hey, you're finally bowl eligible once again. You are just, Dylan Raiola is probably great. He's receiving a lot of national praise at this point in time. Everybody's saying how great the Nebraska Cornhuskers are. And now all of a sudden, before you play Ohio State, you take on a team that can sling the football. Curt Cignetti's Indiana Hoosiers are going to be able to sling the football around the yard. Say his name and he appears. I believe in Curt Cignetti. I love what this program is putting on paper right now. And then if you look at this early season schedule for the Indiana Hoosiers, it's not just Nebraska that's going to be able to come in with a lot of momentum and a lot of confidence. It's also these Indiana Hoosiers. I think they're 4-2 at the worst. I really do. Now, their non-conference slate is very manageable. And then you look at those 3 conference games before they play the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They go to the Rose Bowl to take on UCLA, home game against Maryland, at Northwestern in that smaller stadium as well. Yeah, they could lose all 3. Just what they've put on this roster and just Curt Cignetti and his past being able to win at every step of the way. And not only that, but being able to win and win right away. I think it's 4-2 at the worst. I think this is a team with a lot of confidence, right? Curt Cignetti is the guy that oozes moxie and confidence. I think they're going to be able to come into this game with a above 500 record. They could be 5-1. They could also be 6-0. Imagine Nebraska and Indiana both 6-0 the week before Nebraska goes to Columbus to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes as well in that game. We mentioned Indiana, their ability to throw the football around. I think that could possibly create some mismatches. If this offensive line for the Hoosiers can give Curtis Rourke time, you spread all these receivers across the formation. The Donovan McCulleys, the E.J. Williams as well. You look at the Miles and Miles, Price and Cross transferring in. And, of course, you can't forget Elijah Surratt. This is a team. Okay, if there's defenses in the Big Ten, not saying this is Nebraska, but if there's defenses in the Big Ten that struggle against the pass, Indiana's going to give them some problems. Okay, Nebraska's got a lot of fourth-year guys. They've got a lot of fifth-year guys back there. How talented are they going to be? We're going to find out a lot about Nebraska against the pass early in the season. We know Shadur Sanders in Colorado, they're going to want to throw it around. Curt Cignetti and this group of receivers, they're going to want to throw the football around as well. A classic look-ahead trap spot right before Ohio State, possibly for the undefeated Nebraska Cornhuskers. I'm going to stay in week number 8. Now, USC and Maryland, these could be, not saying it will be, but these could be 2 teams kind of with different first halves to the season. Let's start first with the Maryland Terrapins. They would be the host in College Park for this particular matchup. I think kind of like a lot with Indiana that we were just talking about. I think Maryland is 4-2 at worst. I really do. Their early season schedule is favorable. Villanova, Virginia, and UConn in a non-conference game as well. And then you look at USC on the other hand. They got to play some really good football teams, and they could possibly be beaten up pretty good. They play some physical football teams as well before they match up against the Maryland Terrapins. Of course, USC has that season opener against the LSU Tigers, but check these 3 games before they go all the way across the country to College Park, Maryland. They got to go to Michigan in their Big Ten opener. There's no more classic Big Ten, bring your lunch pail, physical type of football team than the defending champs, the Michigan Wolverines. And then you got to go to Minnesota, the first Saturday in October. That's a team with a really good offensive line, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. We know P.J. Fleck plays a physical brand of football, and then home against Penn State, a team with maybe one of the best running back duos in all of college football. Those are three very physical teams. We talk about the question, ever since 2 years ago when it was announced that USC and UCLA were going to come to the Big Ten. Can USC match with the physicality of the Big Ten? We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Let's fast forward to week number 9 and talk about the Penn State Nittany Lions going to the Wisconsin Badgers. These are just two gut feelings that I have about these two football teams entering the season. You know, a lot of people are picking Penn State, right? They only have to play Ohio State this year. They don't have to play Michigan out of the teams that they have not been able to beat during the divisional era. Okay, so a lot of people are just chalking up 11-1. They're going to go right into the college football playoff. I would say not so fast quite yet with all of that. You got two new coordinators coming in. My gut tells me that this is not going to be an 11-1 football team. My gut tells me that Penn State is once again a 10-2 football team. So where does that upset come in? USC on the road, and then this Wisconsin game on the road are certainly candidates for that upset, to upset the Penn State Nittany Lions as well. And then I look at it from Wisconsin's perspective, right? The ultimate season as far as the Wisconsin season ticket holder is concerned, because there are some fantastic football games. My gut is telling me I don't think they go 0-3 in their big home games this year. Their 3 big home games, which is Alabama, of course, in the beginning of the season. You got this Penn State game, and then you got Oregon. I think Oregon and Alabama I think there's just more talent on those teams than there is the Wisconsin Badgers. I think there's bits and pieces of this game, especially if this is a night game. And I think this is a good candidate that this is going to be a Big Ten Saturday night game on NBC. I think that brings just a whole nother level to this matchup. Penn State gets a bye before they go to Wisconsin. So you could say, hey, they're going to be ready for the Badgers, but they might be peeking around the corner because they have a bye. They have at USC, they have a bye, they have at Wisconsin, and then they have Ohio State after the Wisconsin game. So maybe during that bye, they're doing a little bit too much preparation on the Buckeyes. They're feeling the pressure that, hey, we got to beat one of these teams that we haven't really been able to beat since 2016. Maybe they're looking too far ahead and maybe focusing a little bit too much on Ohio State, and maybe they should be focusing a little bit more on the Wisconsin Badgers. I'm going to go to my last upset, and this might be the biggest upset, at least maybe in some people's eyes as well. I want to talk about the UCLA Bruins hosting the Iowa Hawkeyes on a Friday night in Week 11. With UCLA, this is a UCLA team that has a lot of offensive firepower. Okay, when it comes to wide receivers, like if you power rank the top 3 receivers on every Big Ten team, UCLA would certainly be in the top 5. Okay, what they have coming back with J. Michael Sturdivant, Logan Loya in the slot, and then I love Rico Flores. Rico Flores was a highly recruited guy, had a really good freshman season at Notre Dame. I think he's going to be able to come into this UCLA offense with Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, Ethan Garbers at quarterback. Okay, I know there was a revolving door. The NIL used to bring in Dante Moore, I think was a part of that because they wanted to see him get on the field. But when Ethan Garbers was given his chance and when he was healthy, he played some really good football. So now that he's the guy, and now that Deshaun Foster, Eric Bieniemy, and this program trusts in Ethan Garbers being the guy, I think that's going to give him a lot more confidence. Look, I think this offense is going to be pretty good. Now, the offensive line, little bit of a question, but I think that the offensive line is a little bit better than people think. Now, you're facing the Iowa Hawkeyes. This is one of the very best defensive programs in all of college football. There's a reason why Phil Parker won the Broyles Award as the top assistant coach in the country last season, because of what he's been able to build over a decade plus leading this defense in Iowa City. Now, I want to look at the situation from Iowa's perspective. Okay, I think Wisconsin, we just said it. I think Wisconsin's going to be pretty good. Now, the week before Iowa plays UCLA, Iowa will play their Heartland Trophy game against the Wisconsin Badgers. That's week 10. Now, the week before that, we just covered it. What if Wisconsin beats Penn State? They're coming off of a high. They're having a really good season so far. And then that makes Iowa-Wisconsin a really big game. And then if Iowa is able to win that game, hey, it's a rivalry game to begin with between the Hawkeyes and the Badgers. You're coming off of that. And then you got to go on the road, travel across the country on a Friday night, which could be a little bit of a sleepy atmosphere at the Rose Bowl out there as well. This is a team that can, in UCLA, this is a team that can move the football on offense. This is a team that Iowa hasn't really seen a team, I think, like UCLA throughout their Big Ten West schedules over the years. So it might be a little bit different. They got Washington earlier in the year as well, so they get a little bit of a peek maybe at that style of play as well. But UCLA, I think, is too good to be 3-9 or 4-8 or lose a majority of their Big Ten football games. I think that their offense is going to give some defenses within the Big Ten some trouble. And I just think the scheduling for Iowa, where they're at right now, this could be a Friday night game. Weird things happen on weeknight games, and this could be the spot for the Iowa Hawkeyes to possibly be upset by the UCLA Bruins. Big Nation rolls on next. We're talking defense. Who are some of the best defenses in the Big Ten, 1 through 18, and everybody in between? We'll get to that. But first, here's some big facts. There is no better conference on the defensive side of the football, man, than the Big Ten. When we power rank 1 through 18 and everything in between, there's going to be some teams 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 that say, we're the 10th best defense in a conference. We're really, really good. Yeah, you are. That's how deep the Big Ten Conference is. One reason that I can't wait for 2024 is to watch all of these defenses. I'm a defensive guy. I played defense when I played football, so I love to watch good defense, which is why I'm going to love watching the Big Ten this season. All right, we're going to tackle these in groups. All right, let's start at the bottom when we take a look at some of these Big Ten defenses. And I want to start with Michigan State towards the bottom, okay? Because this team was absolutely plundered on the defensive line. When you lose Simeon Barrow, when you lose Derek Harmon, more on him in a minute, right? Those two guys going to other big-time programs, those are some big losses. And it wasn't exactly equal replacement with some of those guys. Daquan Dowse from Georgia Tech. You look at Ben Roberts from Oregon, Kay. There's some big-time question marks up front. I think other physical teams in the Big Ten could have success going at the Spartans' defensive front. I actually like their linebackers, okay? I like Wayne Matthews, the transfer coming over. Cal Halliday has been a stalwart on an all-Big Ten list here from the linebacker position. Jordan Hall, Jordan Turner coming over from Wisconsin. So I like what they have, and then you look back to the secondary, right? They added Ed Woods from Arizona State. Beyond that, they didn't really add much. This is a pass defense, even going back to that great 2021 season, that struggled. So right now, I love Joe Rossi. I love that hire, but I think like this whole Spartans program, they're going to be able to build as time goes on. The big question for the Indiana Hoosiers, can these James Madison transfers translate from the group of 5 to the Power 2, that is Big Ten football? James Carpenter, Mikhail Kamara, you look at Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons. There's a lot of former Dukes on this defense. Can they match up with the much better talent at this level? That's the big question I have right now about the Indiana Hoosiers as well. USC and Washington, I think, have great potential to jump up this list. Washington certainly has to replace, well, a lot of people across their football team, but certainly on the defensive line, there were some really good players from that national runner-up team that, of course, moved on And once again, like Michigan State, they weren't exactly able to replace them with an equal talent level. So both the offensive and defensive line, I think, maybe are struggled for the Washington Huskies this season. I like what they have in the middle. Carson Bruner, Alfonso Tupatala, Ephesians Prysock, Elijah Jackson back there in the secondary. Will Steve Belichick's Patriots type of system be able to translate to the next level? Like, USC never had a talent problem. This was never the 100th most least talented, however you want to say that, defense in all of college football. It was all about alignment, getting a line in the right spot. Dan Tinlin and this new coaching staff, I think, at least will have guys ready to go by the time they snap the football. That's what I feel with this defense, okay? They've got good parts to it. They've overhauled their secondary. A couple of UCLA guys and John Humphrey and Kamari Ramsey coming over. Easton Mascarenas-Arnold, I think, is a big pickup, maybe bigger than some people think out there at linebacker. The defensive line, outside of Bear Alexander, we'll see if those questions can be answered up front. Just what the track record has been with this defense. I know it's a new coaching staff. I know there's new personnel. I get it. I think they're going to improve, but like we said, it's preseason. We just haven't seen it yet. All right, let's jump from number 10 to number 13. Big Ten West flavor in this particular group. Minnesota has a very deep defensive line, folks. I love what they have up front, right? They are that trench football team, that old school type of Big Ten football team. Ja Joyner, Danny Strigo are going to be menaces coming off the edge. Devin Eastern, Logan Redding in the middle. Watch out for Anthony Smith. High praise right now. Spring ball going into fall camp. They're all impact players. I think they can go deep. Depth on the defensive line. Why do you think defensive linemen were going for so much in the portal? Because it is so important in today's day and age of college football to have depth on the defensive line. Minnesota has it. If they can keep maybe their best defender healthy, Cody Lindenberg, that's going to help a tremendous amount as well, partnering him with Maverick Baranowski back there. Secondary, a bit of a question. We know about Justin Wally, but they didn't do a ton in the portal to improve, and that might be the weak point right there of that defense. I think Minnesota's defensive line a little bit more talented than Northwestern, but I still really like Northwestern's defensive front. Richie Haggerty, Aiden Hubbard, you got Jalen Pate up there, Najee Story. Like there's a lot of good depth. There's a lot of good depth on the defensive line as well. And you got to trust David Braun and what he was able to do last year and improve this defense. You lose a Northwestern all-timer in Bryce Gallagher, but you got Xander Mueller in there, who was kind of at that all Big Ten level alongside Gallagher. Will they be able to replace alongside of Mueller at the linebacker is the question. In the secondary, like you lose Rod Hurd transferring from Notre Dame. You lose a couple of guys that go out to West Virginia, out east. So can they backfill that? Are they going to be able to make as many plays as they did last season? That's the big question, but I still really like what the Wildcats have on the defensive side of the football. Illinois is a team where they've got some questions on the defensive line. They certainly don't have the defensive line that Minnesota or Northwestern do, but I look to that second level of that defense, and that's where I really start to get excited about what Aaron Henry can do in his second year as the defensive coordinator. Dylan Rosiek, the leading tackler coming back from last year, Gabe Ackus and Seth Coleman are also in that group. And then I look to the secondary. I think the secondary is maybe a little bit better than maybe some people think right now. Terrence Brooks coming over from Texas at corner. You get a healthy Matthew Bailey. You combine it with the Scots. Now all of a sudden, you're getting a little bit more confidence down there in Champaign, Illinois, that you can cover some people. And that was a big weakness. They got Kansas early on in the schedule, so they're certainly going to be able to need to cover. If they can get one or two of these transfers on the D-line, like a Dennis Briggs, to be really good, I kind of like this defense. I'm kind of warming up to Illinois, maybe getting back and being a better defense here this season. Purdue, they've got some pieces. Like you look at safety Dylan Thieneman, you look at Yanni Karloftis, you look at Kydron Jenkins, Cole Prevard on the defensive line. Those are your pieces that you can certainly build around in West Lafayette, but what do you have after that? I think completing this defense. They went out in the portal. They got some guys to be able to fill in the secondary. Are they going to be able to step in and help out Dylan Thieneman out there? That's the big question right now. But I've got faith in Ryan Walters right now that he can certainly continue to elevate. He's recruiting really, really well, but he can continue to elevate this Purdue defense. All right, we're getting into some good ones here. 7 through 9. Boy, these are some good defenses. Let's start with the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. They were a really good pass defense last year. They returned just about everybody except Max Melton, who was an NFL player. I talked to Richie O'Leary from the Night Report at Rutgers Rival, and he thought, I don't even know if Max Melton was the best defensive back on this team last season. Like, you've got Desmond Igbinosun, Flip Dixon, Robert Longerbean, Shaquan Loyal. They're all coming back in the defensive secondary. One of the best linebacker tandems in the Big Ten, if not the country, with Mohamed Toure and Tyrene Powell. Got to keep those guys healthy, though. Got to keep them healthy. And then the defensive line, Aaron Lewis and Wesley Bailey are going to be able to wreak havoc as well on all 3 levels. This is a very stout defense. And Joe Harasimiak, he was sought after by some of these defensive coordinator openings at other schools, bigger power schools throughout this offseason, but he stayed at Rutgers. That's a name to keep an eye on as one of the better defensive coordinators here in this conference. Let's talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. Luke Fickell and Mike Tressel have a great defensive track record. And now with 1 year under the belt of some of these players in the system, I expect them to really take a step up. They were adjusting things early in the schedule. They faced a lot of teams last year that threw the ball early and they kind of took some lumps. But Wisconsin got better as the season went along, and they have completely retooled their linebacker room. And I'm excited about what they have in that room. Of course, those edge outside linebacker guys as well. Leon Lowry, John Pius is receiving a lot of smoke here in fall camp. I think they're going to be better getting after the quarterback this season. And Jaheim Thomas in the middle, right? An SEC linebacker from Arkansas, the leading tackler on that team. I think he's going to be a stud in the middle of that Badger defense. You move back to the secondary. Hunter Wohler is one of the best safeties in the country. Ricardo Hallman is a turnover machine over there at corner. Like, I love the linebackers. I love the corners. There's some questions up front on the defensive line, but I think their goal and their job this year, eat up gaps, so the rest of the guy behind them can eat as well. Maryland, Brian Williams, the defensive coordinator. We talked about Joe Harasimiak at Rutgers. Brian Williams, he could be a head coach very, very soon. I believe that this is Maryland's best defense of the Mike Locksley era. You look up front, Donnell Brown, Quayshawn Fuller, Jordan Phillips in the middle of that defensive line. They're going to be able to get after it. Now, it's crazy that we're talking about this Maryland team as the best defense of the Mike Locksley era, because you lose Tarheeb Still, you lose Bo Braid, and then you lose maybe your best defensive player, Jayshawn Barham. We'll talk about him in a minute. He goes and transfers over to Michigan. And I think that's going to open up more opportunities for these good defenders as well. I love the way Ruben Hippolyte plays the game of football at linebacker. He is a tough linebacker that always seems to find the football. I think he's going to really emerge. I think you saw a little bit of him last year, and he actually had more tackles, right, than Jayshawn Barham. But I think you're really going to see him take it to that next level and really solidify himself as a top linebacker in the Big Ten. Caleb Wheatland is also in that linebacking group. You look back to the secondary, Dante Trader comes back at safety over there. They bring in Jalen Husky, who they're expecting a lot to do at corner. Glendon Miller had 4 interceptions last year. I really like Maryland. Okay, without Talia Tagovailoa, I think this defense is going to need to be better. I think they're going to lean on it a little bit. I love everything about what the Terps have defensively this season, right? When they joined the Big Ten the last couple of years, they were more offensive focused. But, man, this defense, if they can put the defense together with the offense, watch out for the Maryland Terrapins. All right, let's head to the next group. We're getting towards the top. These are some really good defenses. You got to talk about Iowa. Iowa Hawkeyes I have at number 3. Man, it's just another ho-hum Phil Parker defense. It is another elite college football defense, and it needs to be, right, considering what the Iowa Hawkeyes have been the last few years. We talked about that Rutgers linebacker combination. Boy, that next level up is the Iowa Hawkeyes. You have 2 All-Americans, not 1, 2. Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson are absolute studs. I didn't think, Iowa just keeps impressing me, right? They just keep upping themselves and taking it to another level. When they had Jack Campbell and Seth Benson, I'm like, all right, that's a generational linebacker tandem. Nope. Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson might even be better. Wow, that's crazy to say, but because Jack Campbell was an all-timer at Iowa, but I digress. That is a fantastic linebacker group. Their defensive line is just full of really good players. Is there a standout? Is there an Epinesa, right, on this defensive line? Maybe not, but Aaron Graves and Ethan Herkett, Y.A. Black, Deontay Craig, they're all really good players, and it's a deep starting group up front for the Iowa Hawkeyes. The secondary, they just continue to churn out great players. It's Sebastian Castro stepping up. He's that next one. He's going to be that next great Iowa defensive back that moves on to the NFL and has success there. Quinn Schulte, old reliable. Xavier Wampa back there. Xavier Wampa was a 5-star guy coming out of high school. I think you're going to see him really take that next level up. I mean, Wampa, Castro, and Schulte back there. We'll see what happens at the corner spots, but Iowa is going to be more than okay. I love what they have once again on the defensive side of the ball. There's a reason why Phil Parker won the Broyles Award last year as the top assistant coach in college football. I just think on all three levels, they're a little bit deeper. They're a little bit more complete right now than the Penn State Nittany Lions. But when we talk about pass rush, Penn State is the best pass rush in the Big Ten. They are. Abdul Carter and Danai Dennis Sutton are those dudes. Nobody's going to be able to stop them. You're only going to wish to contain them. If you can contain them, that is success when you play the Penn State Nittany Lions. When you move Abdul Carter to the defensive line, you better be good at linebacker to fill those shoes. They feel pretty good. Kobe King, Dominic DeLuca, they're very high on Tony Rojas. They're probably going to move to a 4-2-5, so that'll allow some depth at that linebacker spot. Kevin Winston back there at safety. He's really good back there. So the questions are going to be at corner. Got a couple of SEC transfers coming in. Can they play at the level of the Joey Porter Jr.'s and the Daquan Hardys and the Kalen Kings and guys like that? That remains to be seen. But I really like the depth of the defense. Tom Allen is a fantastic coordinator. I just love everything about Penn State. I love everything about them right now. I think they're just, once again, how Iowa's maybe a little bit more complete. I think I feel that about the same about Penn State as compared to Oregon. Oregon has a lot of transfers coming in. Like up front, you look at Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell. In the secondary, Jabbar Muhammad. You look at Kobe Savage. You look at Cam Alexander. Look, there's a lot of changing and moving parts on this defense and then moving to a new conference. I just want to see how that all comes together. But this is an extremely talented defense. I'm looking forward to see if guys like Mateo Uyunglele, these sophomores, these second-year guys that Dan Lanning was able to get a couple of years ago in this defense, I want to see them step up and be big-time players on this Oregon defense. This is one of those teams where it's like fifth. We're the fifth best defense in the Big Ten. Look at what's above you. It's pretty damn good. The Nebraska Cornhuskers I've got on here as well. So Nebraska's got a really tough defensive line up front. Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmaker, the Polar Bear, Jamari Butler as well. A lot of fourth and fifth year guys on the back end of this defense as well. In the secondary, experience. That's what I love about this Nebraska defense right now. Tony White did a great job last season. I think it's going to even take a bigger step this next season. All right, 1 and 2, you know who it is. What's the order? I've got Ohio State number 1 and Michigan number 2. All right, when you talk about the defensive line, you talk about Michigan having the edge in the interior with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And then when you look at the exterior, I think Ohio State has the advantage with JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. But you put all 4 of these guys, 8 of these guys combined up against each other, and they're maybe the 2 best defensive lines in America exist here in the Big Ten Conference. Linebacking groups are very comparable, right? They're replacing some stalwarts. You got some transfers coming into Michigan. You look at Jayshon Barn, Ernest Hausman transferred in last season. Cody Simon is good. Sonny Styles comes down to linebacker. C.J. Hicks was one of the top players in his class when he came out. Linebacker, I feel really good about both of these teams right now. I just think Ohio State has a little bit of an edge in the secondary. I do. These are 2 of the best defensive backs in the country exist on these 2 teams. Caleb Downs for Ohio State. Will Johnson for the University of Michigan right now. And there's some moving parts for Michigan. Losing a guy like Mikey Sanders still, I think, is going to be a big loss for the Wolverines. And then losing Rod Moore, the injury during spring ball, I think is going to be a big injury as well. That's a glue piece that kind of holds everything together for the Michigan Wolverines. Ohio State, man, Denzel Burke to Igbinosun to Lathan Ransom to Caleb Downs, just everybody's coming back. Jim Knowles has everything ready to pop and be the best defense in the country this season. I truly believe that. All right, final look at the rankings. I'm going to refer to left-siders and right-siders a lot when I look at power rankings. You look at those left-siders, those are some really good defensive units. It's going to be fun to watch these defenses go at it against some of these offenses in the Big Ten Conference this season. Coming up on the other side of this set of big facts, season predictions, game by game. Who gets to Indy, who makes a bowl, and everything in between. Stick around. The time has finally come. Football season has finally arrived. It seems like this offseason maybe has been dragging on a little bit with the anticipation of what should be a fantastic 2024 for the Big Ten Conference. And it should be a good amount of chaos, right? You have no divisions. You have 4 new teams coming into the conference. Everybody is kind of playing a new set of teams, right? Especially those teams that were in the East Division and the West Division. So you have a good mixture, which could create some very interesting matchups, and not everything's going to be written in chalk, so you got to have some upsets in there as well. It is time to put it all out on the line. It is time to predict the 2024 season game by game. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it, and let's talk week number 1. It all starts on a Thursday night in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm going to be there for that one. The North Carolina Tar Heels coming in to face off against the Golden Gophers. Look, North Carolina doesn't have a great defense. I think that they have Minnesota, that being, has the advantage in the trenches. I think that they can push around the Tar Heels. I think they can control the time of possession in this game. We'll see what happens at quarterback for North Carolina. Of course, coming off of Drake May, Max Johnson might be the leader in the clubhouse. Right now, if you're Minnesota, you got to slow down some weapons. You got to contain some weapons. You got to contain those big plays from Amari and Hampton and others. I think they contain them just enough. Gophers usually play pretty well in this spot. The crowd is usually hot. I got Minnesota winning this first game. Big noon Saturday. The first one is a rivalry renewed. Penn State going to West Virginia. Last year in Happy Valley, Penn State was able to control this football game. This time in Morgantown, you got 2 new coordinators for the Penn State Nittany Lions. This is a good Big 12 team in West Virginia, of course, led by Garrett Green. I could see this one being fairly close early in this matchup, but I think what's going to be revealed is I think there's going to be a big difference between a really good Big 12 team and a really good Big 10 team. I think you're going to see that Penn State pulls away for a double-digit victory. The Sunday, September 1st meeting, duel in the desert, Las Vegas, Nevada, the LSU Tigers and the USC Trojans, the Spider-Man meme of college football games. They are exactly the same. Take the over in this one because I think with all of the changing pieces, both on offense and defense, and the way these two teams are built, I think you're going to see a lot of explosive plays. I think you're going to see a lot of downfield deep shots in this game. I think a good amount of them are going to connect, but I think USC makes the stop late. I think they've done a good job with their secondary. They do just enough to get the big win in week number 1 in Las Vegas, the upset over the LSU Tigers. Let's head over to week number 2. Of course, the big game of that week, big noon Saturday, the Texas Longhorns and the Michigan Wolverines. Look, Texas lost 2 good running backs, including C.J. Baxter, to season-ending injuries in fall camp. So I think that they're going to lean on even more heavily into their throw game. Will they be one-dimensional? We'll see. But I think that's how they're going, and we know Sark likes to throw the football around. I think that is going to be their game plan, to go over the top, spread out Michigan, and see if they can win those one-on-one matchups. But I think Michigan is going to be strong at the line of scrimmage. I think Wink Martindale, a guy that is known for coming after opposing quarterbacks, he is known for blitzing. I think he's going to come after Quinn Ewers. I honestly do. I think he's going to leave the defensive backs on an island. He's going to hope Derek Moore's and Josiah Stewart's and some of these guys up front, they get to the quarterback. I think that this is one of the best defensive lines in America. I think they have an advantage over Texas's pass protection. I look at Texas on the defensive side of the ball. They don't have those two all-everything defensive tackles anymore. I think Michigan can establish the run in this game. They can drag down Texas. I've got Michigan getting a big upset win over the Texas Longhorns here in week number 2. Cyhawk. This game has its own universe. Iowa and Iowa State in Kinnick Stadium. Look, I think that this game's going to be a little bit messy. I think you could see some turnovers in this game, especially Iowa kind of trying to break in that new offense. Who knows where the quarterback position is going to be at this point in time. But I think Iowa this season is going to be very dependent on running the football and being successful in the run game. I think they can do that against a good Iowa State defense. I'm not saying that they're going to go for 250 or 300 yards. I just think they're going to be solid. Then they're going to chip away at the Cyclones in this game. They make enough plays and they make enough stops to beat the Cyclones. Yet again, the Hawkeyes win. Kinnick certainly helps as well. Kansas at Illinois in Champaign. Last year, Kansas was able to move the ball up and down the field as that game progressed, and the Jayhawks were able to put up a lot of points. Now, you look at Illinois secondary, I think it's better than some people think, with Terrence Brooks transferring in, with Matthew Bailey being healthy. But when I look at this team, I don't see some great pass rush options on the defensive line. Maybe last year with Johnny Newton and what he can do up the middle and pushing back some offensive lines. I said what I said about the secondary. We'll see how much it improves. If Jalen Daniels is healthy and all those weapons are ready to go, I know it's a new coordinator for Kansas, but I think Kansas can move the football against this Illinois team. Illinois needs to try to play ball control. They need to try to play that classic Brett Bielema style of game and pound the rock. I just think Kansas is able to put up more points in this one. I got the Jayhawks winning by 10 in this particular matchup. Everybody's going to have their eyes on Big Ten Saturday night when the Colorado Buffaloes face off against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I think Nebraska is just a more complete team, right? I think the only places that Colorado might have an edge is at quarterback with Shedeur Sanders and some of these playmakers on the perimeter. I think Tony White is going to pin the ears back on this defense and say, get after him. Get after him, because where Colorado ran into trouble last year is where teams came after Shedeur Sanders. This offensive line just couldn't protect. I know they've retooled some things up front, but I just don't think that it can match Nebraska and what they can bring in getting pressure on the quarterback. I just think that they're too complete of a football team at this point in time. Home in a night atmosphere, I'd be very surprised if Colorado came out with a victory in this particular football game. Let's move on to week number 3, another big noon matchup. This time the Alabama Crimson Tide playing at the Wisconsin Badgers. Look, we got some really good home games for Wisconsin. We've got some really good opportunities to show the world that Bucky is back. But I think it's fairly early in the season. We'll see how Tyler Van Dyke is working into this offense. Even after Nick Saban retired, even after some of these players left, this Alabama offensive line, I think, could push around what the Badgers have up front of defense. Alabama also has a really good secondary. We'll see if Wisconsin can move the ball through the air in this matchup. I just think that there's a talent disparity between these two teams. It's just too much, even at home, even early in the season in the Kalen DeBoer era. I think Alabama, maybe it's close early, but Alabama just too talented. They end up pulling away in the end. Notre Dame traveling to Purdue. Purdue essentially has all offseason to prepare for this football game, whereas Notre Dame, they got to play Texas A&M in week 1. I think Purdue is going to be ready to play for this game. Now, the key for Purdue is going to be their offensive line. Can their offensive line protect against a really good Notre Dame defense? The secondary is also really good there for the Irish, and we know the new crop of receivers coming in for the Boilermakers. So it's going to be a challenge. I think Purdue can put up some offense against Notre Dame within this matchup. I think Ryan Walters is gonna try to send the house early to try to knock off the Irish, but Notre Dame just too talented. I got the Irish winning by 7. Let's move on to week number 4. USC's very first Big Ten Conference game is against the defending national champs on the road. Welcome to the Big Ten. You get to play the most physical team in the country. And when you look at USC's roster, when you look at their personnel, I think on both lines of scrimmage, it's just a bad matchup for the Trojans. It really is. You know, when their offense is on the field, their offensive line, you're facing maybe the best defensive line in all of college football. I think they're going to be able to get pressure on Miller Moss. I think they're going to be able to get in the face of Miller Moss. I think they're going to have problems running the football and being a balanced offense throughout this game. You look at the other side, when Michigan is on offense, I think they can smash, and we know that's what Sharon Moore wants to do. He wants to smash. I think that they can go right at them. They can run the football. There might be periods of time where they might not throw the football for a long period. So I just think Michigan is just too strong up the middle. USC might be able to get some plays in this game. It might surprise some people exactly where this game is. But in the end, I think the matchups are just so in favor of the Michigan Wolverines. Let's talk about the Floyd of Rosedale. There's going to be some heat behind this one. Of course, Iowa feels like they were screwed out of that game last year. But on the other hand, I think Minnesota wants to show that last year was no fluke. I think it's going to be very similar to last year. I think both teams are going to try to just pound it down the other's throat. I think both defenses are pretty good, and they're going to know what's coming. Both front sevens, I think, are very good. I think Darius Taylor is going to show that he is the better of the running backs on the field in this game compared, of course, to the Iowa Hawkeyes on the other side. I think Minnesota just makes one more play. I think Iowa's offense is still just trying to get their rhythm and trying to get their bearings about them. Once again, we'll see what happens at the quarterback position right in this game for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I think it's going to take a minute for maybe them to get up to speed and be a little bit better on the offensive side of the football. I'm going to finish things off here in this week with Rutgers going to Virginia Tech. There's a lot of people out there that are just glancing over this and just handing the win to the Hokies because it's in Blacksburg. Remember what happened last year? Rutgers ran it. They ran it again, and they ran all over the Hokies in that particular matchup. I think Rutgers can drag down Virginia Tech. I think they can play a physical brand of football, and they bring everybody back. I think Rutgers just makes one more play in this one to defeat the Virginia Tech Hokies at Lane Stadium. Speaking of Rutgers, that's where we want to start week number 5. Look, Friday night game, Piscataway, New Jersey, Washington, undefeated at this point in the season, traveling across the country, and they just are outmatched, I think, when it comes to the interior against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. I think Rutgers can play physical. I think they're going to get after Will Rogers in this particular matchup. I think the Huskies are going to be up and down. I think they can play with some teams, but they're going to play down to certain teams. I think they maybe can make a few plays down the field, but Rutgers in this run game, I think they can be very successful against the Washington Huskies in this particular matchup. Wisconsin going on the road to USC. I think this is a coin flip game. I think this is very, very close to a toss-up game in this particular matchup. But I just think USC just makes a few more plays at home being the difference. I think there's things that Wisconsin can do. I think Wisconsin can run the ball with their good offensive line and Tawee Walker and Ches Malusi and that great depth in the running back room. But I just think USC makes one more play on the Wisconsin Badgers to get the win at home over UW. Let's head over to week number 6, a rematch of the national championship game from last year. The Michigan Wolverines traveling to the greatest setting in college football to take on the Washington Huskies. You know, it's kind of very similar to USC. I just think Michigan, they have a style of play that they play, and it's been very successful. And there's a reason why it's been very successful. It works. And I think it's going to work in this game as well. I think they're going to be able to run right at the Washington Huskies and wear them down. And I think they're going to get in the face of Will Rogers a lot during this matchup as well. Look, this is going to be the end of a brutal stretch for the UCLA Bruins. Going to Happy Valley to play the Penn State Nittany Lions. Look, they got to play LSU, and then they got to play Oregon, and now Penn State. I think Penn State is going to see a beaten, battered, and bruised UCLA Bruins team at this point in time, and I think they're going to take them to the woodshed in this particular matchup as well. USC at Minnesota. This is a scary one. This has an upset potential to it. We talk about those tough physical teams and how teams like a USC or a Washington is going to be able to respond to that. Like, you look at games that USC has played. They're coming off a game against Michigan. They played Wisconsin. Now they got to go on the road to play Minnesota. I think this is going to be a wake-up call a little bit for USC. I think they're going to realize maybe how deep the conference is and how maybe a team in the middle of the Big Ten West, former division, rest in peace, how far they can take them. I think Minnesota can play a close game against USC, but when you look at the Gophers over the top, I think USC just makes too many plays with their weapons to lose this game. I got the Trojans winning, but winning close at Minnesota. Let's talk week number 7. This is the week. Sit your butt down on the couch at 11 a.m. and, well, don't get up for another 12, maybe plus hours. Ohio State, Oregon. That's the game that everybody wants to know. That's the game that everybody will have their eye on. Now, when you look at the Oregon Ducks, a fairly similar non-conference schedule to maybe what they've played in the past. They play UCLA, right? A Pac-12 team in their very first Big Ten contest, and then a Michigan State team with former Pac-12 coach and Jonathan Smith as the head coach and a lot of Oregon State flavor on that team. So this is really their introduction to the Big Ten Conference, the real introduction to the Big Ten Conference at this point, and I certainly think that they're going to get introduced, right? I think Ohio State's defensive line in this matchup can cause some problems. I really do. I know Oregon, they might have the best offensive line in the Big Ten at this point, but I think they're going to load things up. They're going to try to get to Dylan Gabriel. The key for Oregon, get rid of the football quickly. Try to get it to your playmakers in space. But I think some of these defenders, they're going to be able to tackle in open space, unlike some other teams that Oregon might be able to face against some of their really talented players out on the perimeter in this game. On the flip side, I think Ohio State can be physical. I think they can run right at the Oregon Ducks. I think this is a tough game. I think that this is a great game, but I think Ohio State goes on the road and beats Oregon. I think this is an extremely motivated Ohio State team during the regular season. Buckeyes get the win. Penn State traveling to USC. Man, this USC schedule early in their Big Ten Conference slate, it's not easy, is it? It's not easy, is it? I think Penn State can have an advantage running the ball against this USC front. I feel like I'm a broken record. I feel like I've said that a lot. But when I look at this USC front and I compare it to maybe some of these more physical teams in the Big Ten, like you've got one of the best running back duos in the country, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. I think they're going to be able to move the ball that way as well. So I think Drew Aller might be able to have some balance as well. You know, if this Penn State pass protection can keep Drew Aller clean, I believe that they're going to have a good opportunity to do that within this football game. Penn State makes one more play on the road. USC, I think, could maybe make some big plays down the field as well during this game. It's competitive, but Penn State gets the big time road win over there. Let's move on to week number 8. Now, a lot of people are thinking this is a spoiler maker spot, right? For Purdue, Oregon coming off a tough game against the Ohio State Buckeyes. But I think the Ducks are going to play a little bit pissed off losing to Ohio State. I think there's an expectation of greatness now for Dan Lanning and this football team. So I think that's going to happen. I think they're going to be motivated. I don't see this as a letdown spot of any sort. I think the Ducks are going to come out very motivated to set the tone in this game. Now, that being said, it is a Friday night. It is across the country early in this game. I could see something like 14-10 Oregon at the half, but Oregon just way too talented. Way too talented. One of the Big Ten's best against maybe a team that's at the bottom of the Big Ten. I see Oregon pulling away to win this game in convincing fashion. Wisconsin at Northwestern. Growing up as a Badger fan, boy, those games in Evanston, they will haunt your dreams. They will haunt your nightmares. This was a Northwestern team that went into Camp Randall and beat the Badgers last season. I think this is competitive. I think the wins off the Lakefront Stadium, could maybe halt Wisconsin's passing game a little bit, right? This is probably the most high-profile opponent to come into that Martin Stadium over there at Northwestern. I think their defense can do things against Wisconsin. I think that they can bring them down a little bit. But I just think Wisconsin they have more talent on the offensive side of the football. Northwestern is going to more of a dual threat quarterback type of offense. So I think that could maybe give the Badgers some fits in this game. I know too well. I've learned from history. I think the Badgers pull it out, but a late touchdown, maybe a last-minute drive is needed to top the Northwestern Wildcats in this particular matchup. Now, at this point in the season, I've got Nebraska at 6-0. They got a win over Colorado. Everybody telling them how great they are. Oh, Dylan Raiola's great. Matt Rule, we told you. We told you Matt Rule was going to bring back Nebraska football. They're bowl eligible finally for the first time in a long time. The week after this, they play Ohio State. A lot of people are going to be looking forward to that particular matchup. Indiana is a team that can sling the football around. I think Indiana is going to pull one at some point during the season. I think this is the week. I think you see a good amount of offense in this game, but it's Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers that pull the upset in a look-ahead spot for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Speaking of that, let's move on to week number 9, that Nebraska-Ohio State matchup, maybe very similar to that 2021 Michigan State-Ohio State matchup in the middle of the season where the Spartans were on fire and they were highly ranked going into Columbus. And then Ohio State dished out a piece of humble pie. I see this very, very similarly. I think Ohio State is just a superior talented team. I think Nebraska's schedule early in the season really plays into their favor of starting undefeated. Now, I know they have the loss to Indiana, but I think they follow it up again with another road loss to Ohio State, now at 6-2 at this particular point during the season. Penn State at Wisconsin in this matchup. Now, I think Wisconsin is going to win one of these big home games this season. And I think this is the most favorable for them. I think this is the most likely upset for the Wisconsin Badgers. Look, I know Penn State coming off of a bye week prior to this matchup against Wisconsin. But after this game against Wisconsin, Penn State plays Ohio State at home. So they might be peeking around the corner a little bit, but I think the Badgers get them a walk-off field goal. Madison goes crazy. I think it's a night game, which also plays into the favor of the Badgers. Now, the Badgers are riding high going into week number 10, and this is a bad spot. They got to go on the road to face off against the Iowa Hawkeyes in week number 10. And I think this is maybe one of the better offensive outings for the Iowa Hawkeyes all season long. I think they're going to be up. I think they're going to be ready to play. I think they're going to be ready for Wisconsin. And I think Wisconsin might be a little bit up and down this season. And I think this might be one of those spots where they might be a little bit down. I got the Iowa Hawkeyes winning over Wisconsin. Even after a big confidence boost for the Badgers over Penn State, it's just beating Penn State and then Iowa on the road. That's a tough spot. I just don't foresee that happening for Wisconsin in this year. Now, UCLA coming off a much-needed bye week, right, over those handful of tough physical football games against really good playoff caliber teams. I think they play fairly well against Nebraska. I think they're able to move the football through the air. I think that game against Indiana might show some teams some things, and UCLA has some weapons of their own out on the perimeter. But the positive spin on this for Nebraska is maybe in the past, this was a game where they would find a way to lose. They get the one-score win at home, find a way to win, and knock off the UCLA Bruins in this game. Oregon at Michigan in Ann Arbor. Of course, Oregon playing a little angry after that loss to Ohio State, and now they come in. The knock on Dan Lanning after a loss against Ohio State is going to be, guy still can't win the big game. He can't win the big game. Now, when I look at this particular matchup, of course, Michigan is going to try to drag them into their style of play. This is a contrasting styles type of game that I'm very much looking forward to this season, but I just think there's too much talent on the field on the outside for the Oregon Ducks. I think that they're going to be able to exploit some matchups on the opposite side of Will Johnson. Just too many weapons. I think that it's early November. I think this could be a Midwestern style of football game, but I think Will Stein in Oregon, they can play that type of football game. They're going to hit a few big plays down the field, and it's enough for the Oregon Ducks to get their really first big win of the Dan Lanning era on the road in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This could be a Big Ten championship elimination game, by the way, as well. Ohio State at Penn State, likely big noon, hasn't been announced yet, but Ohio State traveling to Happy Valley. Look, it's just year after year after year this happens. I think we get excited about what Penn State is, and then Ohio State comes to town and they show the difference between a team that can win a Big Ten championship or at least be in that conversation, and then someone like Penn State that's just a notch below. And I think that these teams kind of measure up the same way as they have in the past. Look, for Penn State to have a chance in this game, Abdul Carter and Dan Dennis Sutton, they need to go crazy. They need to be able to get pressure on Will Howard, but even if that is able to happen, I feel pretty confidently that Ohio State can run the football and run the football very effectively against this Penn State front. I think Ohio State is just too strong. I got them winning by 10. I think Penn State is ready. I think they're prepared. But once again, you look at last year's matchup with Drew Aller and how he was in that football game. I think Ohio State is going to look at that and say, hey, if we get pressure on this guy and if we get in his face for the majority of the game against this Penn State offensive line that's not as good as last year, I think they're going to have a good day. I think Ohio State certainly wins that football game as well. USC coming in at 6-2. You got a Washington team sitting here at 5-3. I think Jed Fish and the Washington Huskies are going to get better as this football season progresses. And I think that they're going to get a big win on the schedule somewhere. And I think this is the spot. I think you got two teams that are looking to move the football up and down the field that are pretty similar, right? When you look at them, roster-wise on offense and defense, what they can do on offense, maybe the lack of strength on the offensive and defensive line for both of these teams. I think this is going to be fairly up and down. The greatest setting in college football pays off. Huskies get another win in Seattle, Washington over the USC Trojans. Let's move forward to week number 11. Now, we mentioned that Iowa getting a big win over Wisconsin after Wisconsin gets a big win over Penn State, but I don't think Iowa's going to be playing at that level all season long, offensively at least. I think this is a big upset opportunity. I think UCLA is going to get better towards the back half of the season, especially after that bye week. Competitive against Nebraska, and I think they put it together. Look, Iowa, emotional rivalry victory the week before. Now you got to fly across the country on a Friday night to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Could be a little bit of a sleepy atmosphere in there. I think UCLA looks at this game and say, yeah, we know Iowa's defense is tough, but we just got to score a few times. And I think they get it done. This is my upset. I think UCLA finds a way to defeat the Iowa Hawkeyes in this particular spot here in week number 11. Let's move forward to week number 12. UCLA keeps it going on the road at Washington. I think this UCLA, I really like what UCLA has on the offensive side of the ball. I really like their weapons on the outside. I think that both of these teams are going to put up yards. I think they're going to put up points, but I think UCLA keeps the momentum going with a road win over the Washington Huskies. Look, Oregon traveling to Wisconsin late in the year. We'll see what the weather's like at this point in time. Wisconsin at this point, kind of a little bit of an up and down season, right? With some losses, but you did beat Penn State in there. Oregon is just too talented, right? I think Wisconsin is going to be a good team. I don't think they're going to be maybe a really good or a great team. I don't think they're going to be able to really pull two upsets like this during a given season. Oregon's just too talented, playing with too much confidence and momentum, especially following that loss against Ohio State. Ducks win big over there as well. Nebraska at USC. I think this is a very important game for both of these teams down the stretch, but we got a lot of... Nebraska is going to be tested through the air. They're taking on a lot of good passing attacks this season. I think UCLA makes a few more plays in this game, or I should say USC. Whoops, sorry about that. I think USC makes a few more plays in this game to defeat the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I think when they face off against some of these high-profile offenses, they're going to need to match that at some point. The big question for Nebraska is going to be, can they go tick for tack with some of these explosive offenses that are coming in to the Big Ten Conference? Week 13 has a matchup for Penn State that is intriguing, I think, for multiple reasons. The last time Penn State played at Minnesota, 2019, they were ranked 4th in the country. The Gophers found a way to win that game and pull off maybe their biggest win in program history at that point in time. Penn State, so at this point they have losses to Wisconsin and Ohio State. I think to get in as a 10-2 college football playoff team, they're going to need to win and win convincingly. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them to do that at this point in time. But I think Minnesota can play competitive with some of these teams on the schedule. I think this is a spot where they can get after Drew Aller. Like, that's the key against Penn State. If you can get after Drew Aller, you can have success and just contain this run game throughout this contest as well. Can Minnesota run the football? I think they're going to have a little bit of success in this game. I think this is going to be closer because I think there's going to be games down the stretch for some of these teams that are closer than they would like. I've got Minnesota playing a close game against USC, and I've got Minnesota playing a close game but just short of the upset against the Penn State Nittany Lions in this particular matchup. Wisconsin at Nebraska, right? Wisconsin has owned the Huskers since they have been in the Big Ten, and this year, in many different ways, is the year where maybe Nebraska starts to turn the corner on some of these things that have plagued their program. I think this is a spot. I think it's a very competitive football game, but I've got Nebraska just edging the Wisconsin Badgers. Another close game between the Huskers and the Badgers in this particular matchup. All right, rivalry weekend. Wisconsin, I've got them winning the Axe in a battle of 6 and 5 football teams. I don't see Nebraska winning back-to-back games to end the season against Wisconsin and Iowa, so I think the Hawkeyes end the season on a winning note, 2 straight wins over the Nebraska Cornhuskers within that rivalry. Okay, Michigan, Ohio State. Ohio State is going to be an extremely motivated team, and this is why they're motivated. They are so hell-bent on winning this football game, and I think they're going to do it. It's in Columbus, Ohio. I think that this is a more talented team than the Michigan Wolverines right now, and they know they have to win this football game. There's going to be some Big Ten championship implications on the line at this point in time. I just think Ohio State can do too many things in this game. I think Ohio State can bottle up Michigan, right? They're not as diverse in what different things that they can do on the offensive side of the ball. I think Ohio State breaks the streak and the Buckeyes get the win over the Michigan Wolverines in this game. Late in the season, I think Notre Dame is going to be playing for a potential college football playoff spot. I think they're going to be motivated. I think they're going to come in focus, and I think they top USC in that particular matchup as well. Where does that leave us at the end of the season? It leaves us with a rematch in Indianapolis with the Ohio State Buckeyes going 9-0 in the Big Ten slate, and Oregon's only loss coming to Ohio State within this game as well. I think Michigan has a better college football playoff resume with the win over Texas and losses to Ohio State and Oregon than Penn State does. Penn State's most significant wins at this point would be against an 8-4 USC team and a 7-5 Wisconsin team. So maybe one of those, USC I think might be ranked maybe. I'm not sure if Wisconsin would be ranked, right, with that type of resume that they put out at this point in time. So I think Penn State would be on the bubble with teams like an Ole Miss and Missouri that have favorable SEC schedules certainly this season. So we'll see how the committee treats that. I'm sure everybody has the most confidence, right, in that college football playoff committee to make the right decision. An 8-4 season for the Trojans, all right? First year in the Big Ten with this schedule, that's not a loss. That's not a failure. I think this is a good building point. 2025 could be the year of the USC Trojans. I mean, you look at all of those teams between 7 and 5 wins. I think there's going to be a lot of circle of sicko. Team A beats Team B, but Team C beats Team B, and Team A beats Team C. There's going to be a lot of everybody beating everybody in the middle of the conference. I think there's going to be good depth when all is said and done. All right, let's get to Indianapolis and the Big Ten championship game. The Oregon Ducks and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Revenge on the mind of the Oregon Ducks, and the newcomer. The newcomer wins the Big Ten title. Okay, here's why. I think Ohio State is so motivated and they're so hell-bent throughout this regular season being in a position to beat Michigan and to be able to continue their pursuit for a championship. After that emotional win and all they've put into that game, you're facing an Oregon team that now they've been able to see the Big Ten slate. Now after that loss, they've been able to build some momentum towards the end of the season. It is going to be very difficult. I don't think we see a Washington Part 2 like last year. It is going to be very difficult to beat the Oregon Ducks twice during a season. Oregon wins the Big Ten title. They get that first round bye, TBD on whether it's the number 1 seed or the 2 seed, 3 seed, depending what happens out there in the SEC with teams like Georgia and Texas and Alabama and Ole Miss and some of those contenders down there in the Southeast. But I think there's a good probability that Oregon's the number 1, Ohio State is the number 5 seed, and these teams meet for a third time in the semifinals in a rubber match. Who wins that one? Well, that's a problem for future Ted to figure out. What a season it is going to be. So excited about so many of those college football games this season. I think there's going to be a lot of competition. I think there's going to be some surprises, but I do feel pretty good. I do feel pretty good about my predictions right now. Let me know what you think. I know you were going to do it anyway, right, on Twitter at Big Ten Ted over there, the audio platform on Spotify, comments over there on YouTube. Follow and subscribe, of course, on all of those as we continue to grow as the 2024 season is about to begin. But let me know. I'm curious what the nation thinks out of these predictions as well. We know predictions and power rankings, right? Everybody's got an opinion on those. Big Ten season right around the corner. First one in the books. Next one is right around the corner. Until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next edition of Big Nation.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.